More 40k rules updates today. It seems that the Forge World Imperial Armour options are back on the table for Chaos Space Marines, and there's a small but helpful update for some Chaos Knights. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the latest 40k rules changes, which Games Workshop have just published to update the Forge World units for Chaos Space Marines and Knights. After the two changes, the Chaos Space Marine ones were going to be coming at some stage. Typically when they release a codex, they'll usually FAQ the main book within a few weeks, and then following that they update the Forge World units to try and make sure that they fit in with the new codex, with things like keywords and everything else. Sometimes there's a few surprises, but just on a basic level they need a few keywords adding, and until then they break all sorts of army special rules. Perhaps the biggest surprise in this update was a nice helpful thing for Chaos Knights. A couple of Questoris variants just got a lot more takeable. We'll start with that first, and then move through to all the Chaos Space Marine changes. So the interesting news for Chaos Knights is that if you happen to own a Questor Megara or a Questor Styrex, then they just finally gained the Abhorrent keyword, so they actually work with a bunch of the choices in the Codex. Basically in Codex Chaos Knights, they redesignated their Questoris classes to be called Abhorrent classes, to make them distinct from the Imperials, I guess. But it did mean that really quite a lot of rules in the Codex don't work if you're not either an Abhorrent or Tyrant class, so they technically wouldn't work on even the Questor Megara or Styrex, even though they're clearly of the same class. It did seem a bit of a weird disparity between these guys and the Imperials, because the Questor Megara and Styrex could work just fine with all the Imperial Knight synergies, so it did seem that the Chaos ones have more been passed over as an accident, rather than being deliberately left by the wayside. It did seem weird that I think they'd updated the Imperial Armour FAQ twice since the book came out, and neither of them gave any changes for these guys, but now they've finally decided to do it, simply making a change that changes the Questoris keyword to the Abhorrent keyword on their datasheet. I think this one is quite relevant to competitive Knight armies, as they're both relatively strong units, particularly the Megara. Decent all-rounders with a fair amount of shooting, plus a fairly devastating sweep attack with that claw. They also get an invul save in combat as well, quite a nice thing for Knights in general. The big guys do tend to be a little bit on the fragile side when anything touches them in combat that's fairly scary. Allowing the Abhorrent keyword allows you a few different things. It allows you to take several relics that are locked to Abhorrent classes only. Things like the 2+ armor save, which is quite a nice bonus on just about any knight, would work quite well on these. It allows them to count towards Traitorous Lances as well, to fill out knightly detachments a little bit better. But easily the most important in my opinion is that it allows them to take demonic favours, the points cost upgrade in the book that gives them one of the different god keywords, and also allows them a couple of different powerful extra abilities. There's a lot of good ones out there, and Chaos Knight lists tend to make some fairly heavy use of them. Even if you just went for the ones that added a bit more durability, like the Chaos Undivided ones for the 6+ Feel No Pain, or no reroll hits, both of those seem pretty solid. And depending on which god you choose, you also get some god-specific stratagems as well. Say for example the Chaos Undivided one allowing that one to bring you back from the dead, at least on a few wounds remaining. Overall it definitely makes the Megara a lot more usable. I feel like people will see it as a different alternate option to the Codex ones, things like the Abominant and the Desecrator, so quite nice for Chaos Knight players to have one more option in their arsenal. Unfortunately there's still nothing for the Cerastus and the Acastus pattern chassis though. I can't help but think that with the Cerastus chassis largely being quite inefficient, it wouldn't have been that bad to allow them to take the Abhorrent class upgrades, and the same for the Acastus ones and the Tyrant upgrades. Still though, definitely a decent step in making more of the Knight roster a bit more usable, and making things a bit more even between the Chaos Knights and the Imperial ones. Otherwise, on the Chaos Space Marines side, there's rather a lot of changes. Chaos Space Marines have quite a decent Forge World arsenal, though the vast majority of the keyword alterations tend just to be to make the units work with the army, as opposed to trying to make any big changes. If we run through things briefly, then first out they took out the smokescreen stratagem. That one now has its own equivalent in Codex Chaos Space Marines, so it's kind of redundant. Just about everything gains the Let the Galaxy Burn and Traitorous Astartes keywords, two of the main abilities in the Codex. Let the Galaxy Burn allows those wanton rules and buffs flamers across the board. A lot of the Forge World stuff tends to be heavy weapons, so that's usually going to be a decent first turn damage boost to them. Exploding 6s to hit aren't a bad thing at all. It's perhaps more of a notable improvement to anything with a flamethrower though, say for example the Terax Termites twin heavy flamers. They'll be actually seriously quite bitey if you do take that option, and it drills up from the depths near some light infantry. Otherwise, adding a Traitor as Astartes keyword is kind of a basic just to keep the faction functioning, as lots of abilities in the book key off it, and it is kind of the Chaos Space Marines faction keyword now. They also got rid of the Mark of Chaos tag on quite a lot of units, which did apply a bit more to the last codex than the current one. The way that marks work now is all centralised in the actual codex. You can only apply them to core or character models, which I believe would just be the Chaos Contemptor Dreadnought in the Forge World Imperial Armour Compendium. They've also been FAQs to have Chaos Undivided at base to allow a leadership debuff stratagem, unless you choose to upgrade them in one way or another. There are a fair few god-specific units in the Forge World arsenal, things like the Khitan and the Bloodslaughterer of Khorne and the Greater Blight Drone of Nurgle. They don't get the Mark of Chaos keyword, but they do get their god-specific keyword, so could still be useful for certain stratagems in the book. Otherwise, the various demon engines got their rules just consolidated into the demon engine rule. That's the core chaos rule that gives them a 5+ invul and regenerating 1 wound per command phase. No real changes there, but I suppose it keeps things a bit neater. Interestingly, the Greater Blight Drone keeps the 5+ feel no pain that it had. It isn't replaced with the -1 damage that Disgustingly Resilient has largely gone to across the board. On balance, that's probably slightly better than the alternative. Though to be honest, I don't think it really needed to go to -1 damage. It's not exactly the strongest datasheet out there. The Fellblade gets the updated Demolisher Cannon rule. That's the enormous Space Marine Baneblade equivalent that packs an enormous gun and a Demolisher Cannon. It means the Demolisher Cannon goes to D3+3 shots and AP -4. It's a solid upgrade to the unit, but again, still pretty pricey for what it brings to the table, I think. For various datasheets, Possess now take up the space of 2 models in various transports. Previously, you could have Dreadclaw drop pods, deep striking in a lot of them on paper. Kind of makes sense that that's been updated, seeing as it has been for the core codex. Finally, the Helltalon gets the Havoc autocannon upgrade. Previously, that was just a basic autocannon, so now it gains AP -2, a tiny little bit more threatening, but again, not really anything to make the unit particularly better or worse overall. Overall, for the Chaos Space Marine changes, I think it's largely fairly expected stuff. As with quite a lot of Forge World units out there, there's a lot of stuff that just isn't really super overwhelming, but they do still have a few choices that I think are worth considering. I think the Dreadclaw drop pod's still very interesting. Chaos Space Marines have plenty of units that are fairly scary when delivered on Alpha Strike. Things like Chosen, Noise Marines and Rubric Marines could all potentially use that. Getting the Alpha Strike on the opponent is pretty nice. At least then the Dreadclaw drop pod becomes a bit of an annoying mobile melee threat, at least something else that the opponents have to scrape off the objective, and it might go around causing problems, locking things up. Otherwise, I think the Chaos Contemptor Dreadnought still remain very usable, a solid core firepower option that can pack those scary Volkites, and maybe some missile launchers or las cannons. I think the Mark of Tzeentch is a pretty interesting upgrade for that, and negating 1 failed save is quite good on a fairly valuable platform. And maybe one of the other standout ones is still the Chaos Decimator. Throwing out a bunch of mortal wounds at range is generally pretty scary. There's still a few cool Demon Engine synergies that you can use, and its defensive profile isn't awful with 12 wounds and an invul. Other interesting ones might be the Leviathan Dreadnought, just for some tough shooting, the Termite Drill to deliver some units and then have some melee threat, perhaps the Khorne Greater Brass Scorpion, which maybe is a few too many eggs all in one basket, but it does have some fairly impressive stats. And if you want artillery, they do have the Whirlwind Scorpius, not super hot since the barrage nerf, but still just a little bit of targeted firepower exactly where you need it can be quite powerful. So let me know what you make of the Forge World changes. If there's anything subtle that I've missed that's quite important, please let me know down in the comments. I'll post a pinned correction comment below if there's anything interesting that I've missed. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k updates coming. I do tend to post new stuff just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's how I can afford to spend the time to keep all these news and updates coming quite so regularly. If you are enjoying a lot, any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.